You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com, where we have past podcasts, blogs, and a couple items for sale. So check us out, beardedtheologians.com. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this week's show. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold. Today we have, longtime friend of the podcast, and I feel like we got to upgrade your green jacket to a gold jacket, or
I'll take it.
Maybe something with sequins on it. That'd be great.
Ooh, even better.
We have Matt Rawle on the podcast once again to obviously come back and talk about a book that he's written.
Right.
Yeah, we love having you on, Matt. You've got a new book called Jesus Revealed, I Am Statements in the Gospel of John. Man, we're glad to have you back.
Yeah, no, it's good to be back. And I will look forward to, so I have a Bearded Theologians coffee mug, but a sequenced jacket is now, I've now added that to my list. I'll be looking at Amazon because that's what I like to do. Anywhere I am, I like to be noticed as soon as I walk in the door. And that will certainly get me noticed wherever I go. But yes, no. So we have another book out. It's called Jesus Revealed, the I Am Statements of the Gospel of John. And I'm excited that I joke because it's my first big boy book, right? Because normally, and as much as I love pop culture and still love pop culture, and there's going to be more pop culture titles coming out, but I normally write on the Grinch and Scrooge and Doctor Who and these kind of finding God in these places. And this book's about Jesus, so that's refreshing this time, and specifically the I am statements, and kind of in two categories. One, how the I am statements work together to give us a fuller picture of who Jesus is, right? These things don't happen in a vacuum. They're not just random sayings of Jesus, random wisdom sayings of Jesus as he wanders the Galilean countryside. They all work together. They're all on purpose. And then secondly, the Gospel of John is most appropriately read as a drama or a piece of artwork, right? It's this theologically rich kind of presentation. Like, for example, when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus is representing all of the Pharisees. So there's this kind of dramatic, almost like Greek dramatic picture that's being presented. Jesus speaking with the Pharisees through Nicodemus. Same with the Samaritan woman at the well. He's speaking with all Samaritans in that moment. So in this kind of the second real nugget of the book is recognized, it's divided into 4 sections. There's the scene, which is how the I am statement is used in its immediate context, right? And then there is the act, which is how it's used throughout the New Testament. And then there's the play, which is how the I am statement is like, I am light, right? There's a lot of imagery throughout the entire Bible of what it means to be light and the light of God and this kind of thing. So the play of how it's used in the entire work of God's story. And then finally is your role. Like, not much of it matters unless we're incorporated into the story and we're called to carry the story along. So on the one hand, what really sets this study apart is how the I am statements work together, and we can jump into that, but also this whole artistic side of the gospel. In fact, Sarah Dewey, who really partnered with me in this book, she created a different piece of artwork for each chapter, and also original music that's on the DVD or the Amplify video, which is great. Amplify has been a huge part of our success in our local church of finding good material, good theologically sound material at your fingertips, which has been great. And this is, I think, and I can say this because I wrote them. This is I think the study that really, the DVD is always valuable in the sense of it's me teaching a lesson and talking about the book, and it makes it super easy for leaders to use. But in this case, the DVD or the Amplify video really enhances the experience because you see the artwork. In fact, it's a time lapse of Sarah creating the artwork with the music that she composed in the background. Because years ago, the way that this study started, well, it started as it was my ordination Bible study that I had to write for ordination.
Right.
So for all of you in the trenches of the ordination process, like, don't throw anything away, man, because I had to write a 4-week study on the I am statements. And I just, after having to do that, I built on that and just kind of over the years crafted and recrafted. And this was something like 10 years ago when Sarah Dewey and I were mulling about in Shreveport at a Starbucks, or I think it was Rhino Coffee at the time. Anyway, I said, what does I am light look like to you? And she like went into her studio and got a camera and did all these really cool filters and stuff. And I was like, that's amazing. I said, well, okay, well, now what does I am light sound like to you? So then she went back into her studio and created a beautiful, like 3.5-minute electronic. And this is when like Derek Webb was like doing his like electronic solo deal. And she kind of really followed in that kind of a vein. And just had this now we have a study on the I am statement. So we have a study on I am light, and now Sarah has a video and original music on I am light. And like, man, this is really something special. And we just kind of tinkered with it for 10 years. And finally now, right, no good idea ever dies, right? Now 10 years later, it's an actual study and it's published, and there's Amplify videos and book tours and all these things. So like, don't throw away your good ideas ever. Like, they will come back. Keep playing with them, keep tinkering with them, because 10 years down the road, you might have something really remarkable and special on your hands.
Yeah, I love that. There's a couple things I love about it. One, I hope there's a reveal somewhere in there that this is all just like a Michael Scott conference room thing with Jesus.
Oh my gosh.
No,
I,
right?
I lead like my staff, and they're like literally outside the door. So I'm going to whisper this, but I am Michael Scott. I'm the Michael Scott of this church, because and I'm not kidding. We have things like staff fun days. Like,
Right.
hey, we've done like an escape room before. Like, they hated it, and I loved every flipping minute of it. Like, this is so great. And like, we had what was it? It was summer. No. Fifth Sunday Summerfest a couple of Sundays ago. It's a total Michael Scott thing. Yep. We had like inflatable water slides, and we had family games with ribbons. I mandated that my children's director went and bought ribbons as prizes for these families up to 5th place. I didn't even know that there was a market for 5th place ribbons. Like, what loser makes 5th place ribbons? The color's orange. Who even knew that 5th place was orange? That's so bonkers. I am the Michael Scott of Methodism, at least in this context, in my staff, because we do escape rooms, and we do themed parties. we do all of those things, and oh my gosh, I love that you said that, because it's absolutely true.
Well, that's what I love. It's your MO, right? You write about other things, and it's like, all right, we're gonna package this one really nice. He's gonna tell everybody it's a big boy book. It's Michael Scott conference room.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Everyone hold a card on their head, and it's all guessed to see what's written on the other side.
Right. No,
that's good.
The other thing I love about it is I think that's often, for me, reading's not the fun thing that I do, right? I do it because I have to, and I need to.
Yeah, sure.
But visual, audio, conversations about these things, those are huge. And so you all putting those as an intentional package to this, right? The music, the art, the conversational piece of
music video, and that's kind of where we're going, right? In terms of Bibles, because my daughter, I have a 15-year-old. I have lots of kids. I have a gaggle of kids. It's a circus, but it's our circus, so we love it. So my 15-year-old, I know she's never going to do a book study, and like that kind of hurts my heart as her dad and as a pastor, because like I do those, like I write those, but I know she's not going to pop a DVD in and watch me talk, or anybody. But there is this whole other experiential piece of it. Now she could really get into watching artwork being created, theological art. Right now we're talking. So now there's this whole other thing, and we'll get into this later, because I have an Advent study coming out next year, which is going to even up this ante further. So this is almost like a test run of this next study that's coming out in 2023. But so it has this whole other realm to it, and of course the Gospel of John lends itself to that, right? I am bread. Like, it's all metaphor, right? I am light. I am bread. I am the good shepherd. I love this, and this is in chapter 5, that we are so comfortable. I mean, right, left, conservative, liberal, fundamentalist, whomever, we're all quite comfortable recognizing that the I am statements are metaphors. Like when Jesus says, I am the light of the world, we know that he's not physically glowing, right? When Jesus says, I am the bread of life, we know that he's not like pumpernickel or rye, right? This kind of thing. Until we get to, I am the way, the truth, and the life. For that statement, we seem to hold on to it with like an ironclad literalism, right? And so we kind of nuance that, and like, why the change now? Like, I am the vine and you are the branches. Are you made of wood? Are you connected to a vine? Like, come on. But when we get to that one, we like to sink our fingers into that as being this ironclad. So we nuance that a bit and bring that back into the scene, the the act and the play of what God is doing. So I think it's a really, I'll say this, I do think it's a really rich study, because all the I am statements really do work together well to create this beautiful layered mosaic of who Jesus is. And then in addition to that, there's a whole experiential part of it where you're seeing artwork being created, you're hearing an original piece of music, and that is the Gospel of John. It is good art, man. Good art always brings you to another place. Like, good art projects beyond itself, right? Good art is water into wine, right? That's why we have that in the Gospel of John, right? It takes the ordinary and makes it extraordinary. So it really is a fun study.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. The Gospel of John lends itself to that over the other three.
Sure.
And Matt and I had a long conversation about our favorite Gospels and things like that a couple of weeks ago. And kind of the same conclusion for John of it paints a different picture of Jesus and truly paints one, right? You know, I am the vine. We see that, right? At least I do, very clearly, of just how robust that conversation.
Yeah, careful of your
is.
royal we, sir.
Yes,
careful of your royal. I mean, there's you want to talk about, this has nothing to do with the podcast, but pet peeves is when preachers start using the royal we.
Right.
Like when we read the Gospel of John, we see branches everywhere. Like, well, maybe you, Jack. Like, I don't see that.
I'm going to take a big assumption. You wrote a book on it. I'm going to use the royal we in this room.
Yeah, there are only three of us in this room, other than our esteemed listener.
That's right.
Yeah. But go ahead. You keep dropping wheeze. Go ahead.
Yeah, we got it. But it paints it does paint this picture visually as you read through that gospel from start to finish. Yeah. And tapping into that's huge, I think.
Yeah, and when you look at the other gospels, like every one has their own important flavor. Like Matthew's the first one, because Matthew's like the teaching gospel, right? It's really systematic. It's easier to understand than maybe the others. The Gospel of Mark, and I've recently started reading the Gospel of Mark very differently than I have, because when you begin to realize that the Gospel of Mark is written against Christian insiders, those who have gained power because of the church, Mark really starts to take on a very interesting tone that the other Gospels it's terse, it's short. The disciples never get it, and that's on purpose, because the author of the Gospel of Mark is saying, hey, you're getting lazy, disciples. You're getting, those of you who are in the church who are beginning to gain power and influence, you're missing the whole Jesus thing now. Anyway, and then, of course, the Gospel of Luke is like written to outsiders and is more Gentile and flavor and flair, and has things like the birth narrative in it, and brings these other things into it from a Greek kind of world and perspective. And that's really cool. But then John, oh my gosh, are brushstrokes on with a palette, and the way that it's layered, in that you always have to look at the thing behind the thing in the Gospel of John, right? One of my favorites, I may have mentioned it on a podcast because I've been on 100 times, but my favorite thing in terms of imagery in the Gospel of John is the charcoal fire. Love this. At the very, very end, John chapter 21, right? Peter's swimming, he's fishing naked with the other disciples, right? And he sees Jesus cooking fish around a charcoal fire. Well, at that point, Peter's like, oh no, he knows, right? Because the only other time that a charcoal fire is mentioned is when Peter's denying Jesus. And John specifically says Peter was warming himself by a charcoal fire. Like, that's a specific detail. And now that's the last thing that Jesus saw of Peter. So now here's Peter fishing, and he sees Jesus cooking around a charcoal fire, and he's like, oh, filth and foul. Jesus knows. Oh no. So what does he do? He puts on clothes and jumps in head first because he's ashamed, right? Just like Adam and Eve, like he puts on clothing and he jumps head first into the water, because the last conversation they had is, Jesus is washing his feet, and Peter's like, don't wash my feet. And Jesus is like, no, you don't have a share with me unless I wash your feet. And Peter's like, well, then wash all of me. And Jesus is like, stop, idiot. Like, I don't need to wash all of you. You're fine. But now that Jesus has denied him, oh man, Peter jumps head first into the water. and leaves all the other schmucks with the net in the boat, which I love. I love that detail. I can imagine, because I love it says like Peter, James, and John, and 2 other disciples are with them. How'd you like to be forever remembered as one of the other 2 disciples who are, great, thanks. I followed Jesus for 3 years, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. Like that's how that's how it worked out for them. So they're bringing the stuff back, and then like Peter, like doing the breaststroke, trying to get up to the thing, and that's when like Peter, or he didn't say Peter, he says Simon, son of Jonah, right? There's a title loss in that, like Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me, right? It's such a great detail, that charcoal fire, and that's what John does, man. John has these small, very specific details that you just have to hang on to. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and the life was light, and light shined in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And then by the end of the story, Jesus was, and it's the only gospel in which this happens, Jesus is resurrected in the midst of darkness. Mary came to the tomb before the sun had risen and noticed that the stone had been rolled away. Oh my gosh, fantastic. Now all of a sudden the prologue that you read 20 chapters ago makes sense. You just got to hang on to these things. And that's what when I mentioned that all the I am statements build on each other, they do. Like I am light, just briefly, I am light, like represents Jesus's divinity, up there, out there, something that comes to us. I'm the light of the world. But then you have bread, and bread doesn't grow on trees. You have to make it.
Right.
Bread is a human invention. Like there's no bread tree. Like you have to make bread from raw ingredients. So I am bread really emphasizes Jesus's humanity as a product of humanity. And then those 2 images come together when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. Right, because shepherd can mean, oh Lord, like the 23rd Psalm, right? The Lord is my shepherd, like God is my shepherd, but it's also like King David is the shepherd of Israel, right? And then I am the vine, you are the branches. We are incorporated into that I am statement when we get to I am the vine. But then we're giving a job to do when it says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, right? That way that Jesus is talking about is the way of suffering. It's a roadway, and all roads lead to Rome, and those roads are littered with people on crosses. And then finally, it brings it all together with I am the resurrection, right? The affirmation of all of these I am statements come together. And it is like watching Michelangelo paint the Sistine Chapel when you're reading the Gospel of John, because all of these things which seem like independent brushstrokes when you take a step back finally portray this beautiful tapestry that's been woven into itself all along. It's shocking, isn't it? I know.
I love it. Yeah. I'm just going to take it in for a second.
Yeah, just chew on that for a minute. Bechtold, just chew on that.
Where were you 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the Gospel of John?
Waiting. I was sitting by the phone waiting for one of you schmucks to call me and say we should do a podcast. That's where I was. You want me to answer that question? That's where I was. I was sitting.
We're just trying to find the bedazzled jacket.
But you got to spread it out, man. You got to spread it out. You can't have all your mojo in one episode.
That's right.
You gotta spread it out. And by mojo, I mean 2 weeks ago, not today.
That's right. Yeah, that's
right. So Gospel of John is this beautiful artistic expression, and it's never exhausted. The Gospel of John is never exhausted. Every time I open it and dive into it, I know it sounds cliche-ish, but it really is. I learned something new and I noticed something different. And it's just, I'm in awe. It's just like artwork, right? Just like when you're looking at a beautiful painting, you don't, I've seen the Mona Lisa and then like move on. Like, no, you keep going back to that well. And it's never exhausted, just like God's grace and God's activity in our life. It's never exhausted. It always leaves us with a empty fullness, right? That we are satisfied, but still hungry for more, right? That beautiful tension of being satisfied. My grace is sufficient for you, but never exhausting that grace. So that really is the Gospel of John for me.
I love that. I don't even know what to ask.
Yeah.
You painted such a beautiful picture.
Yeah. Done. Well, you can find the book at mattrawl.com.
We'll see you later, Matt.
It will leave you speechless, right?
And we really hope that Amplified will put that study next to our stuff.
That's right.
So that way we can get more clicks too, as you're getting more clicks on this. So
synergy, baby. Absolutely. Right. Look, if I had mattrawl.com coffee mugs, I'd send you one, but I don't. I don't have the cool kind of swag that y'all do. But in terms of the experiential part of this, right? So we have Jesus revealed. the I Am Statement of John, and we're kind of experimenting with this whole artwork and music and whole thing, because the next study that's coming out, and I'll just do a quick little teaser for you.
There you go.
It's going to be Advent in 2023, and it's called "This Will Be a Sign to You," right? What the angels tell the shepherds. This will be a sign to you. And the entire study is exclusively about what we hear during the Advent season, what we taste during the Advent season, what we see during the Advent season. So it builds all of these senses together. And it's going to be a very sensory experience that we're going to experiment with in terms of the study, because the whole point of that story and that the incarnation, the whole point of the Advent season is to recognize that God now has senses, right? In the person of Jesus. God has hands to hold one another. God has eyes to see the suffering of humanity. God has ears to hear the cry of the poor. So really this study, because I'm always, in this, I do like to do this every time I write a study or put together a project. I call them projects now. So every time I do a project, I'm always trying to plant the seed for what's coming next, right? Let this be a test case for what we're going to do next time. And the next time, let that be a test case for that, right? Because I'll also be talking about this in terms of Jesus revealed in terms of technology, at Church of the Resurrection coming up at the Leadership Institute. So I'm doing a breakout section, Jesus revealed in the augmented age, is what I'm talking about, because especially clergy, we are kind of in this very in-between kind of time, right? You have, or as I like to call it, there are 9 intersecting circles that happen. And I won't get into all of those, but specifically in terms of technology, and y'all do podcasts, like you're in it to win it in terms of tech. But we have kind of these 3 ages all happening at the same time. We have like this industrial age where like you're passing a plate in worship and you're putting dollar bills in a plate, and you have to have someone bring a plate to a safe, and those kind of very manual things. But at the same time, we're also living in this information age where people are doing online giving and auto draft and use this QR code to give your text to give or whatever. But now there's this this augmented age that's happening. So we're talking to several Methodist foundations to say, like, can you build for us a digital wallet for our congregation in terms of estate planning and giving and all of these things? Because it won't be long before someone's going to ask me, hey, Pastor Matt, can I pay for my kid's mission trip with the interest from my Bitcoin? Like, how can I do that? And it's a whole total revenue stream that the church is going to miss out on if we're not ready to receive it, right? So the short version of what I'm going to present at Leadership Institute is, how can we still find Jesus in the midst of this emerging augmented reality? And I don't mean augmented in the sense of like being in the metaverse necessarily, because that's a whole other thing, like the Oculus and Horizon. And we're doing some work in that too, but where are your church members? Like, where are they in terms of how they find themselves in the world? And we need to, I mean, the simple metaphor is, if you have 20 chairs in the choir loft, you're never going to have 21 members of your choir, right? You have to have a place, even if it's a placeholder, right? You have to have a place for the 21st person, or as I like to say, you have to have a placeholder for the 21st century. We might not be there yet, but we're going to be, and we're going to have to be in 10 years in terms of how we understand discipleship. COVID helped us expedite some of that in terms of technology and live streaming and all the things. But it didn't answer problems. It actually presented a lot more questions that we kind of weren't even ready to answer. Right. In terms of the podcast, the Bearded Theologians, like, how have y'all adopted kind of this augmented, this new way of being, in terms of podcasting, because you don't have to physically be present, like COVID, when everyone's, wherever they need to be in isolation and all that stuff, like that didn't affect the podcast per se. But now that we're coming out of it, have you seen differences in terms of the way that you're recording and distributing and sharing and seeing, an audience? Like, has the audience changed at all for y'all?
First off, it's our podcast. We ask questions.
Hey man, look, I left you speechless with Jesus revealed. So I said, what I'm going to do? I'm gonna turn the tide. Let's change the current, baby.
I mean, he's also been on enough that, like, he
That's
actually,
right.
yeah,
That's
like
right.
we probably should just start having him on, be on all the
Just a
time,
guest
and
host.
That's just the whole thing, right?
he can actually be,
Reoccurring guest
I'll
star.
be on the every third podcast when there's a
There you go.
new moon. I'll be at the ready,
Yeah.
right? Just send me the link.
right. I think the big thing that has shifted for us, and for me anyways, in the new appointment, taking a new appointment in a new annual conference, that was one of the things that people were looking at, was the videos, they were listening, or however they took in our stuff. And that was totally different than it was 5 years ago when I took this appointment, and maybe one or two people actually looked it up. Whereas in this situation, we actually, about half my congregation has looked at something we've done, and now I'm being intentional that this is something that's a part of what I do. And so, we're going to start, sharing the things, and, hey, this actually, this is something I do, and it's part of what I do as part of my ministry.
That's fascinating, because like in the past, these digital ventures, right? Whether it's live streaming or podcasting, has always seemed other and not extracurricular, but in addition to what we're doing. And slowly it's becoming what we are doing, and the way that we are connecting with people, period. Like, we used to stream as kind of a convenience if you were traveling or if you're at home, but now I have a third of my worshipers are online. It's, oh my gosh, and like, I say COVID's over. COVID's not over. COVID's not over with us, for sure, right? But increasingly, you would not, if you asked me 4 years ago that a third of my worshiping community would be online and not geographic, which is fascinating to me, that those geographic boundaries are beginning to break down. The people are listening from all over, and especially like with podcasting, like, you don't have to be in a particular place. You just need earbuds. You need earbuds and a device. That what used to be a sign of extra, like, we have all this extra time to do this podcast and do this live streaming, it is now being incorporated into what we do and who we are, right? And that is both exciting and terrifying.
and I think that's the biggest thing we noticed. The COVID curve was not steep for us, because we had been doing the podcast. Streaming, was it right? That was all comfortable. What was interesting was watching everybody catch up and put all of their things out there. Great. Big support of that, right? Go do your thing. There's plenty of room for all of us. And then, as COVID over, used air quotes for our listeners here, everybody stopped. The number, not just the church, but the number of podcasts out there spiked during COVID and is increasingly going down today.
We're done. We're back in person. We're done.
We're back in person. We can do the thing. And even the church is asking the question of, why are we still live streaming? The church in general, not, why are we still doing this? We want people in the building, right? We want this, that, because we need to pass the plate so they can physically put money in. It's like, oh, no. We can't go back. We're not going back. We were behind then.
Love it.
2 years ago.
No, love it.
We're still behind now, but good Lord, we can't take a step back. Right.
And that was one of the things that because we at Asbury, we moved to one worship service. And part of that is because we were consistently getting like 62% of our live worshipers back from COVID. There was something like that, 65%, something like that. And now a third of our worshipers are online. But part of the issue is, like, we have a beautiful but also very large sanctuary that was built 15 years ago. And when you're having less than 200 at your early service, it looks like a cave and it looks like a cavern. But what folks who are worshiping at the early service didn't recognize is that at that time, at least 20% of the worshipers were online. So it looks like they're not there. And it looks like there's an absence, right? So there's this anxiety of like, where is everybody? Well, they're still engaged. In fact, some of our givers, oh my gosh, I'll tell you this, for hope. I'll give you a picture of hope. We had a family who, and this was last year during our stewardship campaign, which is very casual because we were still rebuilding and all the things and PPP loans and all, my gosh, like, hey, if you want to keep your pledge as you did last year, great. If you need to change it, great. Just let us know. Like, that was the extent of our stewardship campaign last year. And I had a family who I knew I hadn't seen since 2019 mail in a pledge for $30,000.
Wow.
So I of course followed up,
right,
and say, well, thank you so much for your gift. Like, tell me, like, I know I haven't seen you in like 2.5 years or whatever. And they said, oh, well, we've been online, like, we've been following the whole time, like, we've been invested the whole time. Like,
yeah,
that's new.
Yeah.
Okay. So even though that prayers, presence, gift, service, and witness, the presence part of that, the church doesn't quite know what to do with.
Right.
Because like I said, 30% of our worshiping congregation is online and not geographic.
Right.
What do we do with that? Right. Because I'm looking in the membership of how do I, record members who are not local, who are still involved in the ministry, right? Is that membership? Is that affiliate membership? Is that associate member? Like, what does that even mean, right? In terms of prayers, presence, gift, service, and witness, what does a non-geographic presence look like in Methodism?
Right.
And I hope we figure that out at some point, because that's where, I mean, even in terms of like looking at big Methodist stuff, like jurisdictions and conferences and denominate with this, division that's coming up, or separations. Well, pick a word, split, separation, just pick one. That's fine. Whatever. We all know what we're talking about.
Right.
Like when we start to enter in non-geographic relationships, what does that look like? Because that is not, the industrial age does not know what to do with that, because the industrial age, everyone has to be in the same place at the same time for the factory to work.
Right.
You can't remotely put together a widget.
Right.
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 Anyway, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
No. And I was going to say the church struggles with it anyways, especially with digital presence, because we're so territorial. Right.
Oh,
Those
sure.
are my people, whether you have 4 churches in town or just
the world is my parish, but get out of my face. Yeah.
Right. And that's a hard thing to navigate with our colleagues, and just churches across wherever. But I mean, we were finding in my last appointment, I haven't been here long enough, we had twice as many people in online worship than we did in the sanctuary.
Sure. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And from all over, who are participating in small groups, online.
Oh, yeah.
They were joining in the Zoom prayer stuff. They were giving, they were doing whatever they could from wherever they were, or starting something in their own community with their groups of people, which was fascinating to me. Of here's how I could be present from afar. And just embrace that and not be afraid of it. And we're not seeing those people. It's like when you go from one service to 2. Well, we don't see those people anymore. Are they really here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they are. You don't have to know what they're doing. Just know they're there, right? And they're doing their thing. We struggle with that, whatever medium it is, right? Talk about technology from hymnals to screens, or nothing to hymnals, right? It upsets the apple cart, and we don't know what to do with it for a bit. But it seems, probably with everything, there's a lot of resistance. Or yes, with everything, there's a lot of resistance, but there seems to be more resistance to this space, the digital space.
There is,
to go backwards.
And I don't know, because one of the things I talk about in terms of like the 3 marathons of COVID, the first one is traumatic innovation, right? We everything was shutting down. We didn't know what to do, so we had to innovate. We had to, right?
And you either loved it or hated it.
Yeah, exactly. And then the second COVID marathon, which we're just seeing the end of, is existential exhaustion. The Great Resignation, right? A lot of people leaving. They're tired. They're asking big questions. Do I want to stay in the same denomination? Do I want to stay in the same relationships? Do I want to stay in the same jobs? They're these big questions. Right now, we're in what I call nostalgic scarcity, where we don't have the same kind of funds and stewardship that we used to have. And then therefore we try to only invest in things that make us feel like it's 2019, right? Before the pandemic, like all of those things. So 2 things that we've talked about in terms of just where we are as a church, because we have the same things, the same struggles in terms of change, right? The first thing to recognize, especially with our older adults, the first thing the first thing to recognize is the grief that comes with change. Right? There's a grieving that happens because, nothing is the same as it was.
Right.
It just isn't. Right. So, which is why, like, there's a Sunday school class and a half that really want us to start printing bulletins again. Right. And it's not about the bulletin. It's about, I used to come to church and have something in my hand, and I don't have something in my hand anymore. And I'm grieving that loss, right? I've always, for the last 50 years of my life, I've had a bulletin in my hand, right? There's a grief that comes with change, and there's a grief that comes with loss. And then the second is to recognize that there is always a loss when there's change, right? Change lets go of something. whether it is a bulletin, whether that is a way of doing something. So there's grief and there's also loss in terms of change, adaptive change, right? When you're making these big changes, things aren't the way that they used to be. And we hope that the change is for good and for positive things, not, not change for good in terms of that nothing will ever change. But
right.
So on the one hand, as pastors, we have to recognize grief that's happening. And we also have to recognize loss that's happening. And if we're ever going to grow the church, we have to make room for people who aren't us. And the folks who aren't us are the 15-year-olds of the world who will never have a bulletin in their hand. And what does that mean for church, right? Everything is on their phone. Like, what does that mean? Giving, they're never going to put a dollar bill on a plate, ever, right? In fact, this new generation, like my daughter, who's 15 years old, will never have a Facebook account, unless she's forced to, right? And we've gotten real good at, like, we're live streaming on Facebook and we have Facebook groups. We have all this. Understand that the youth group, they're not ever going to have Facebook. So we have to be ready. We have to build that 21st chair for the 21st century, and all those things. And, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it is exhausting because we're having to triplicate everything right now. Just like public school teachers, man. I mean, hug a teacher today in a safe sanctuary way. Like, go find a teacher today and hug a teacher in a safe sanctuary way. Because they need our love and support of all of the things that they are being asked to do, and pastors are a close second, right? Because we're having to triplicate everything and hold all of these ages, industrial information and augmented, but also hold grief and loss all at the same time while being fruitful in ministry. And what will help all of that is to get a book titled Jesus Revealed by Matt Rawle, the I am statements in the Gospel of John. It will solve all of those problems. It will solve all of those problems by the time you get to chapter 3. And if it doesn't, then return it and say that Bechtold made you do it.
Yeah. I'll give you nothing, but a pat on the back and I'm sorry. No, it's great. I mean, really, you to poorly bring it back to the Gospel of John, right?
Yeah, sure.
Jesus is doing something so different than what the folks had experienced up until that point. And I mean, you see it in the confrontation he has with the religious leaders. You see it in the conversations he has with the disciples when they don't get it. You see it in all of these interactions Jesus has with people. It's change, right? And it's reframing and it's moving forward even just little bits.
But I think that the I am bread in particular is to this point, Zach, where it's fascinating. This is so good. So he said, I'm the bread of life. And there's the feeding of the 5,000. But then interestingly, Jesus separates himself from manna in the desert. He's like, that's not what I am. So there's this tension because the Pharisees are all about Moses, right? They're all about the law. They're all about Moses. And Jesus is saying, I am the bread of life and I am not that bread.
Right.
Like Moses gave you that bread and that bread ultimately led to death and was insustainable. So Jesus enters into this tension of old and new. And not necessarily old and new, that Jesus was innovative and that Jesus was like new on the scene, because John is very clear that the word of God has been there from the beginning. But this idea of I am actually not that bread in the wilderness. And I write a little thing about that almost that almost didn't make the cut in terms of editing. So here's a little inside scoop for your audience is that in reading, and I've always thought this, but have now been brave enough to like put it in print, is that it is not a mystery to me of what manna was. Okay, let me just lay it out there because it says it, right? I'm not making this up. I'm just reading the Bible, friends. Like the night before, there were a lot of quail on the ground. Like quail was their meat, and there was this whole flock of quail. And then in the morning, there was this white flaky stuff everywhere. How interesting is that? Is that and they're like, what is this? Well, I know what it is. There's a bunch of quail here. Like, what do you think it is? Right. But here's the thing. The way that it's worded is so fun and curious to me. Like, so imagine, because they were complaining. That's the thing, is that Israel was complaining about it, about the manna, right? They were hungry, they were thirsty, they were being, they were like, they're all on SPR, right? They're just all like, man, what's going on? We need to make a change on all this stuff. Hypothetically speaking.
Right.
I have a great SPR. I don't know about your SPR. My SPR is fantastic. And it actually is. That's not a joke. I have a really good SPR. Anyway, so they're complaining, they're mad, they're angry. And Moses says, and they're like, what is this? Hey, yo, what is this? And he said, this is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. He didn't say this is bread.
Right.
He said, this is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. Now understand, this is the same Moses who came down the mountain and saw a golden calf and said, WTF, like what's going on, guys?
Yep.
What the foundation? Like, what are you doing? And of course, Aaron's like, I don't know, boss. Like, I put some gold and it just kind of came out. I don't know. I'm just as surprised as you are, boss.
That's right.
So then Moses pulverizes the golden calf and puts it in the water and makes them drink it, right? So here's the thing, right? Moses gives them like polluted water to drink. So here we are. What is this? This is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. So imagine like you're in a restaurant, and I say this in the book. Imagine you're in a restaurant and you're being just a jerk of a customer, right? You are just making your server's life a living hell, right? And you order a steak rare, as you're supposed to, because you're a red-blooded American and there's no other way to eat a steak. And you order that filet rare and it comes out well done. And you're like, what is this? What is this? And the server says, this is the steak the chef has given you to eat. Right? I think there's a lot of that going on in this story. Right. Of the people were complaining and they're a bunch of quail. And then dare I say there's remnant of quail on the ground in the morning. And they're like, what is this? They're like, oh, what is this? This is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. Right. So Jesus, interestingly, doesn't say, I am that. I am the manna in the wilderness. He actually distances himself from that, curiously enough, and says, I am not that Moses gave you. The bread that I give you, you will never be hungry again if you feast on me. And it's so true with the Gospel of John. You will never exhaust the Gospel of John. That's the mystery of you will never be hungry again. Obviously, it's not like filling your belly with food, like, because I'm a madman in terms of eating. I'll eat anything that's in front of me, with the exception of pickled beets, because Satan himself made pickled beets. So, but I will eat just about it. It's not that. It's in the Gospel of John in particular, you will never exhaust the fullness that you receive in reading the gospel. And that's exactly what that means. So Zach, to your point, in the Gospel of John, specifically on the I am bread, Jesus holds this tension between, industrial age and augmented age, right? This tension of the way things were and the way that things are perceived to be and have to be with something that is revolutionary. It's not new, but it is revolutionary, which are two different things, right?
Right. Well, we talked early on, or you introduced, I wrote a book about the I am sayings as if nobody's ever done it before, right?
Yeah.
But
it's the only book on the market that talks about the I am statement.
That's right. Go pick it up first time. But we talk about scripture, Gospel of John, whatever it is, there's always more to go back to. Yeah. And that's important for us to remember as pastors, as people in the church, that reading it once isn't enough, right? Revisiting it at different points in our life for different reasons, on a whim, right? And just being present in the scripture, in the stories, with what we know today, as opposed to what we knew yesterday or 20 years ago or a lifetime ago. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, if you're just scrolling through book titles, another I am. No, it's important to revisit these things today.
Yeah, sure.
Because we live in a completely different world than we did 5 years ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago, 6 months ago. Right. And it's just a practice. For me, it's just a practice in that. How do we revisit these things and go, I didn't notice that before. Right. Here's what this is speaking today to me, and how, as a pastor, do I tell that story? How do I help open that book up for my folks, so that they're curious, so that they're, wander through this with us.
And it also makes in light of that, in terms of like, how do you use this book, right? So let me jump into that for a second. So it's a 6-week study. The way that, we're using it here in my local congregation. It's a 6-week study. We're going to start at the first Sunday of October, which means that because October has 5 Sundays, the last Sunday, I am the resurrection, will happen on All Saints Day, on All Saints Sunday, right? So you dive into these I am statements and you see how they're woven together. And then finally the big reveal is I am the resurrection. And we get to reveal that on a day where we remember those who have gone before us, those who are living in the heart of God, those who will be the first fruits of the resurrection because they've gone before us. And that is a really great way to present all of this material where it just makes sense in the heartbeat and the life of the church, especially so if you are really steeped in the lectionary, right? Where the first Sunday is All Saints, first Sunday of November is All Saints Sunday, and you really dive into that holy rhythm of the liturgy. Then this book really does come in handy. It covers all of your October. You have 5 Sundays, so that's always a trick, to have 5 Sundays in one month. And then that extra Sunday of the first Sunday of November being All Saints Sunday, I am the resurrection. At that point, friends and clergy who are listening, it starts to write itself. The series just writes itself at that point if you use it as an All Saints, ultimately as an All Saints study.
Yeah, building towards that. I love that.
There you go.
Next year.
Yeah, it's like next year.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Oh, don't I know it? Because my calendar's planned until January in terms of sermon series. Yeah, so using next year. Well, if you want to, you can use it for Lent next year because the same kind of thing applies because it's 6 weeks, and it also culminates in I am the resurrection. Right. It also works really well for that, and for, like I said, Advent next year we'll have this will be a sign to you, another really experiential Advent. So mark that down now, friends. Start planning December 2023. This will be assigned to you. So
November of 2023, we expect to have Matt Rawle back on the podcast.
Yes. That's right. With sparkly sequined jacket.
That's right.
Well, have a year, boys.
Yeah. Unless you're on 3 or 4 more times between them.
That's true. That's true. Who knows? There a lot can happen. Look, man. We got jurisdictional coming up. A lot can happen between now and then.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and I'll see y'all there.
Awesome.
Yeah,
we'll be there.
Good, great.
Be there.
I'll be there.
Yet, as always, we love hitting record and letting you just go.
Covered a lot of ground, friends.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Anything else you want to just toss out there?
No, just other than we didn't talk about LSU football at all, which kind of upsets me a little bit.
We're in the Rocky Mountains. The only thing that matters is Broncos football. I'm sorry,
sure. And that's fine.
I was educated. Cool, I was educated on that on Sunday.
Very true.
That college football does not exist anymore, and that it's all LSU and it's all Broncos.
Look, man, I'm willing to do that. I think the Broncos are a super franchise and are tons of fun and rarely play the Saints anyway. So, yeah. So I'm willing to buy that. The New Orleans, the Saints had their first preseason game. Yesterday, Saturday night, something like that. Yeah. Where I just kind of stumbled upon it. I was like, oh, cool, football's on again.
This is happening.
Let's go. Right? Because I love it. I do. I like especially college football. I like it too much. Let me go on record by saying that. I love the sport. It's fun. I mean, baseball is my favorite sport to play.
All right.
But football is certainly my favorite sport to watch and consume. And now 'tis the season, man. I'm looking forward to it. So that's probably the only thing I got, other than there's a new doctor for Doctor Who that we will see in probably another year. But other than that, that's all I got.
Does Arkansas play LSU this year?
Yes, every year. We play Arkansas every year. Our rotation is Kentucky. We don't play Kentucky every year because they're in the East, and we switch out Kentucky with Tennessee. So we go back and forth between Kentucky and Tennessee. But yeah, Arkansas we play every year, which is fine. We usually do fairly well against Arkansas. That's always around Thanksgiving. Texas A&M is now our Thanksgiving game, which is legit. That's becoming a good rivalry. And then we have obviously we play Alabama every year, and I'd like to say that that's a rivalry, but it's really not. They kick our butts every year. We'd love to say that's a rivalry to make ourselves feel better, but it's not. It's not. So we're probably looking at it pains me to say it, but 6-win season, 5-win season. We have a new coach, right? So that's we stole Notre Dame's coach. That's fun. Highest paid coach in college football, because that's a great use of money. But it'll be fun. It'll be fun to watch for sure. So, and thanks for having me, guys. It's always a joy.
Always. We learned a lot about you today. How you take your steak, that you don't like pickled beets, and what you feel about college football coaches.
There's a lot there, and so much more. Looking forward to next time.
Always. We love having you on. We appreciate you coming.
Well, the book you can find pretty much anywhere, but go to mattrawle.com and buy it from there. because
anywhere fine books are sold.
Yes.
Fine books.
So thanks for being on the podcast. And so for
Absolutely.
the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
Guys, I want you to subscribe and like this video and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.